Hey guys, welcome to the K Nation Movement Podcast. Today we're on episode 26. We have Dr. Joel Gould. He's a dentist from California, but he focuses on the link between vitamin D and sleep apnea. It's super interesting. I hope you enjoy it and have a good one. So welcome, Dr. Joel Gould, to the K Nation Movement Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you. We're doing another podcast basically on, where we've been. This is our first podcast in about, I would say, 8 months. That's kind of a long story. We won't get into it too much, but it's nice to get back into the swing of things and give our audience another quality piece to listen to. And so, you're unique because typically what we've done in the health industry is we've talked to doctors and researchers, but we've never focused on the dental side of things. And it's been really fascinating for me. Again, I'm not going to beat it over the head, but in our other podcasts, I talked about how I got accepted into dental school. Initially, I wanted to become a dentist, and I actually ended up studying my master's degree and looking at nutrition, obesity, and cancer. So we won't get into that too much. Today, I just want to talk about you and find out more about where you came from, because I am fascinated by dentistry and all the things that come with it. So first of all, just tell me about yourself and how you got into the line of dentistry that you are in now.
Right. Well, first of all, I'm from Winnipeg. And I did my undergraduate at University of Winnipeg, which is a great school for that. I went to Western for dental school. And then I graduated about age 24 and I didn't have a job. So I worked for the government of Ontario. I did a really incredible program called it was basically working for the Ministry of Health, the Mobile Dental Treatment Program, which was me in the 1974 station wagon driving to the different schools. But the part was that I had hospital privileges. I could take kids to the OR and put them out. And to be able to do that at age 24, I'd go into a dental school, set up all my temporary equipment, treat every kid, and then move on to the next school. It's a really unique experience. And it gave me sort of a jump on having to think outside the box. When you're 8 hours north of Kenora, Ontario, and your x-ray machine goes out, you have to think about what you're going to do. And even cases that we have to send back, I have to plan very differently because of the transport time back in those days. I moved to Vancouver, where I was a general and cosmetic dentist for about 10 years. I had a practice in Kitsilano and one in the suburbs called Langley. And I loved Vancouver. I'm Canadian through and through, but something wasn't right and I wasn't happy. And I knew that I wanted to be in California, and I chose Los Angeles. I ultimately came down just for a change of lifestyle. I love beach volleyball, and that's really what I wanted to do. So I came to LA to play beach volleyball, and my goal was to have a general dental practice in a quiet beach community and just have a quiet, peaceful life. And that's not really what happened. So I've been here for about 20 years, and I've been in practice for almost 30 years in this one location for 20 years. And my story is a bit unique. And I think that maybe by understanding what happened to me, it'll make sense why you'd even want to talk to me in the first place. So, dentistry is a great career. I loved it. It was fantastic. You missed something, but you didn't miss anything. I think you're in a better field now. Dentistry is going down a different pathway that I'm not happy with for a lot of different reasons. Not necessarily news for what's going on with medicine. But so what happened to me was 5 years ago, I discovered by accident that I had sleep apnea. I don't know, it should be a pretty big topic that everyone's talking about in Canada. But at that point in time, it was a shock to me because I wasn't obese. Now, that's not true about my earlier life. I was always a big guy. So I stopped weighing myself when I reached about 250 pounds, but I also had Crohn's disease. And so for anyone who doesn't know what Crohn's disease is, this is an inflammatory bowel disease. It's not sexy. It's a bathroom disease. And this disease destroyed my life. From the age of 14 until 48, it dominated every thought that I had. So whatever I was doing was planned around the bathrooms. And part of why I loved LA so much was that every quarter mile there's a beach bathroom. And that one thing changed my life and made me feel comfortable, which is sad. But some people have disabilities that are very tragic. Having to use the bathroom multiple times a day is, it's more of an annoyance. But I just, it was my normal. All right. So what does a dentist have to do with sleep apnea anyway, right? Well, first of all, you may want to ask me some questions. We'll start there. So my 20th year at this location in Manhattan Beach, 5 years ago, I discovered I have sleep apnea.
Yep, for sure. No, that's really interesting. Actually, now that you mentioned that, I'm curious to see. So you are now, you said 20 years at this clinic in California?
Yes.
And you discovered that you had sleep apnea 5 years ago.
Correct.
Okay, so you were already moved to California, and you were about 15 years in when you discovered this. Okay, we'll circle back to that. I do have just some general questions. just going through your website and reading more about what you're doing. And I've two of my closest friends that I went to undergrad with ended up going to dentistry school. They're both practicing dentists now, and one of them is actually Western Ontario alumni, which I know you went to.
Yeah.
So, the three of us, when we were in our undergrad, we had discovered, I had discovered the ketogenic diet, and we started experimenting with that, which helped a lot of us. All three of us had gained a significant amount of weight being in our undergrad, studying, not really focusing a lot of time and energy on the gym, which I'm sure you've gone through, and a lot of people that you went to school with have gone through the same thing. So we were very passionate about health and fitness, which I think a lot of people that end up in medical school or dental school, they don't necessarily have the same passion. At least I found that people I went to school with were more focused on just gunning for that straight A+ and not really spending time exercising or playing sports. And so we had a different angle to that field. So discussing it with them back then and even now, the idea of prevention versus treatment comes up a lot. And this is the same in any other field like general medicine. We spend a lot of time treating people. We spend a lot of money treating people, but we don't spend time figuring out, well, how can we prevent these things from happening in the first place? So the same way I see a lot of prevention models that could be put into place in medicine to prevent people from getting obesity and being put on things like statins in the first place, I see it in dentistry as well. So a lot of the issues you have with your teeth and your, the care of your dental hygiene, well, a lot of those things could be prevented early on. Now, one of them was obviously brushing your teeth and flossing, but another thing, in my opinion, is a dietary. So could you go into that a little bit more, the idea of prevention versus treatment in the field of dentistry, and also how what you eat can affect things like cavities or your dental hygiene down the road?
Dentistry has always been much more prevention oriented than medicine. There's no doubt about that. And we're always the ones yelling at you to floss and brush your teeth. So, and our colleges are always saying, tell people not to smoke. So we're definitely healthcare providers. And I think that the way that medicine has changed is that we've ultimately become primary healthcare providers in a very different way than people are thinking. I see my patients every 6 months, and I see them for an hour, hour and a half. So I'll often spend a longer amount of time with them doing a procedure versus medical doctors who they'll either give a prescription, be very quick, or they'll do a procedure with someone anesthetized. They don't really get to know someone like I do. Being in one location for 20 years really gets you to see the different generations. I think we get a different view of health. Now, I always believed that if you didn't take care of your teeth, if you didn't brush, you didn't floss, you didn't eat right, that your teeth would decay. But I came upon a really big deception that I kind of want to introduce right away, because as a graduate of a Canadian dental school, I was very shocked that I didn't learn about one particular Canadian dentist. And I think that you probably know this guy very well, is Dr. Weston A. Price. So this guy was a Canadian dentist who in the 1930s made some very profound observations about teeth, gums, dental health, airway health, and orofacial cranial growth issues. And his information was never shown to me in dental school, and it's still not taught now. And the only way you can learn about him in any meaningful way is either to do this on your own, or I'm going to assume some functional medicine programs are looking at his work. The biggest issue with Weston Price is that he's viewed as a villain to a lot of people who know who he is. And that's a much longer story. But what I discovered was that what I thought about dentistry wasn't 100% correct. So we were told that the bacteria in your mouth will cause gum disease. And that's what gum disease is a bacterial infection of the structural supporting tissue of the teeth. And a cavity is a bacterial infection in the actual tooth structure. And these are things that were happening profoundly in the 1920s and 30s. In fact, when I graduated, I was still extracting teeth and doing complete dentures. Now, this is still done in rural areas, and I was, outside of Vancouver. So this is something that is not that far off of what we've been doing. Now, when I saw this work, it came down to this guy, from observational reasons alone, was the first most important advocator of epigenetics. And for anyone who doesn't know what epigenetics are, genetics are the genes that you inherit. Epigenetics are how you turn those genes off and on, and what causes that to your environment. And so this is something that is still not taught in dental school. And this guy discovered, without knowing what DNA was, that there were two chemical substances that were instrumental in our oral health. And that's what sort of got me interested in this path. And it changed the way I viewed people's teeth. I would see patients come in who were obese, with gum disease. And I just assumed they had sleep apnea. And I thought, what's wrong with these people? Why aren't they taking care of themselves? And it wasn't until I realized what was wrong with me and the syndrome that I had that I was able to discover what was really going wrong, what the root cause of what the dental breakdown was. So, everyone's talking about this connection between the mouth and the rest of the body, saying, well, the infection from the mouth can go to the brain. We find the same bacteria in the brain that we found in the mouth, like it's leaking up there. And that's not the way our bodies work at all. Those two different types of bacteria being same bacteria in different places is related, but it's related a completely different way. And so the most basic thing that I discovered was these two missing chemical substances that Weston Price had identified were what we know of today as vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. And the primary functions of vitamin D3 is to absorb calcium, number one. Number two is to regulate the immune system. Vitamin K2 is a cofactor or an activator that activates all kinds of different enzymes to keep you healthy, and especially two specific enzymes, one called matrix claw protein and one called osteocalcin. These are proteins that actively will bind calcium that you absorb and put that calcium into your teeth and bones. And we'll find those enzymes in the mouth. And they were designed to grab that calcium that's coming in. And when you get tartar building up on your teeth, that's a buildup of calcium that shouldn't be there. And it mirrors the buildup of plaque in your heart and on your arteries. So doctors are looking at this plaque on our arteries and saying, well, could be caused by eating fat and meat. And then here I am seeing this K2 deficiency. And then if you ask a doctor, they don't know. And so when I found your podcast, you're very keto oriented, because I do have some really unusual information on that. But that's the basis for this, is that if a ketogenic diet is good for you, which I believe that it is, then what's putting that calcium into the arteries? Well, obviously it's vitamin K2. And when the calcium is not going into the teeth and into the bones of the jaw doesn't grow properly. That's why we don't have room for all of our 32 teeth. There isn't enough width for all the teeth, number one. Number two is we're not having proper nasal breathing. Too much calcium building up in the nasal septum will calcify it too soon and decrease nasal breathing. Once you no longer breathe through your nose, it changes everything, because the craniofacial growth and development requirements are that you breathe it through your nose, and then kids have to start breathing through their mouth, and that changes the structure of the jaw. And this is long face syndrome. So basically, the removal of this D3 and K2 from our environment is the root cause of dental decay, gum disease, lack of room for all of our teeth, but also bruxism, clenching and grinding, and ultimately sleep apnea. So all of these things are really one greater syndrome that I ultimately end up calling the modern epidemic, because it's a disease that's literally caused by modern living. And it's caused by more than one thing, because everything in medicine is more than one. Everything's pretty much multifactorial. There is usually one thing that causes another. But these two missing chemical elements, this is about as close as you get to just two simple things really destroying our ability to breathe and sleep at night.
And let me just comment on something that I experienced, and maybe you can tell me if that is a link that you're discussing now. When I switched over from a heavy bread or starch-enriched diet, where I was having a lot more processed and refined carbs, to something like keto or paleo, I found that because I have a deviated septum, I broke my nose many years ago. I already had some trouble breathing to begin with, but I found that my nose would get swollen and stuffy a lot more frequently when I was having a heavy grain diet. And obviously the oral hygiene was affected. So when I had switched over to more of a ketogenic diet or a low carb approach, my breathing had cleared up significantly. I noticed that in the gym especially. And my oral hygiene, I haven't had a cavity since I was probably a teenager or a kid. So I don't know if those things are linked, or if you can comment on that, because I used to not want to work out just because of how stuffed my nose was.
Right. Well, we have to really think about the basic structure of the body. And we're at this point where everyone's hearing these different catchphrases like grass-fed, organic, ketogenic, intermittent fasting. We have to start to think about what's the intersection of all this? Where does all this meet up? Now, when I started investigating what happened to me, I found all these experts. So I found this Weston Price, and I found a bunch of different experts, and each one of them was saying, hey, look at me. This is the cause of these different issues. And they all intersected in the mitochondria. And that's where the ketogenic diet has its most profound effects, is in the mitochondria. And when we think about the real structure and function of our bodies, we're fascinated because we produce power locally. We don't have one power plant that we send out electricity to, like you see when everything's wired. We have mitochondria, and these mitochondria are little power generators that can even be moved around on a little system of cables and pulleys, and we put them where we want them the most. But to get to the whole point of what this really is that you know that every function in your body is most likely going to be an enzymatic reaction. Okay, so an enzyme is the worker bee of your cell. It will say take two different things and join them together, or take two things and separate them, depending on what this enzyme is supposed to do. The enzymes are powered by ATP, as is the folding of proteins in your body, which is critical to every function. That takes up ATP. So if we're not generating enough ATP, we cannot fold our proteins properly. If we're not generating enough ATP, we cannot pump our neurotransmitters from where they're released back into the nerve. We are not making enough ATP. Every single function in our body starts to slow. And that's exactly what a ketogenic diet reverses, because there's something going on in the mitochondria that completely changes when you switch to a ketogenic diet. And of course, it's linked to the idea that fats burn so much cleaner than sugar. So switching from a sugar diet, number one, it's going to lower your overall inflammation, no doubt. But number two is when you start to burn fats as your primary fuel source, this is what your body was designed to do. And you're amping up your mitochondria's ability to produce energy, and that's where the brain fog disappears. And that's why all these different things improve when you go to a ketogenic diet, because you literally clear out the mitochondria and allow it to make more power. More power is more ATP. More ATP is better protein folding. Better protein folding is better enzymatic function equals better health, period. And this is a very simple equation. It just depends on what tissue you're looking at. You're looking at the gut, you're looking at the nose, you're looking at the lung, but it's all the same. Every cell has mitochondria, and if they are not producing the right amount of energy, the cell cannot perform its function as designed. It's a power generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the main reason why ketogenic diet works for most people, I would say, is because you look at the ATP output, and for anyone that doesn't know, ATP is generally just a form of energy that you get at the byproduct of some sort of other energy source, like breaking down sugar or fat or whatever it may be that your body can run on. And so at the end of a glycolytic breakdown or a breakdown of sugar, the ATP that you're left with is not as much as fatty acid oxidation. So burning fat for fuel is far more efficient, and the brain runs cleaner on it as well, which is why there's a lot of research going on with Alzheimer's disease and specifically brain tumors. And so it is an interesting field. I believe it's Rob Wolf that really talks a lot about this. He would be really interesting to come on the podcast and chat a bit further. But they're seeing early onset Alzheimer's in people in their 30s right now because of the way that we're eating a heavy refined carb diet, which again is another interesting topic on its own. And you mentioned something about how it's similar to the way that we have like a gut-brain axis, right? So the health of your gut, the ratio of good bacteria, bad bacteria, or the bacterial cultures themselves can affect your brain. And that's something I think over the last 10 years has been brought into light, and people are, they're really being mindful of having fermented foods or taking care of their gut health. You hear that word gut health a lot. Now, I'm sure there is, but could you comment on the link between your oral hygiene or your mouth and that bacteria or the health of your mouth to the brain? Are there studies that can link anxiety or depression or similar, I don't want to say mental illnesses, but diseases of the brain to the health of your oral hygiene?
Yeah, well, so that's the same question that everyone's asking, but I'm going to turn it around completely differently for you. And what I want you to know is this is my main paradigm. And here's what I'm telling people. Nobody can keep the right gut bacteria because nobody has the right vitamin D level. Vitamin D itself is the body's main thermostat. This is telling your body what season it is. And as the D level goes up or down, your mitochondria is the engine that should be revving. And the lower the D goes, the slower the mitochondria revs. The higher the D goes, the more the mitochondria revs. But when we get up to a specific point of vitamin D, and I'd call that summer, okay? And these are levels that people are not attaining because we are modern humans living indoors wearing clothing. Vitamin D is the power or energy of the sun in your body, and it regulates many different things. One thing it does is it regulates the production of cathepsidins, and these are antimicrobial proteins. I like to think of them as little protein torpedoes that your body will shoot at to dissolve the cell walls of bacteria, fungus, virus, whatever. Now, your gut lining is loaded with vitamin D receptors, and it's their job, those colonocytes, it's their job to dictate what bacteria they want to have there. Because, most of your listeners already know that we utilize our gut bacteria for products, but our gut bacteria's DNA outnumber ours 100 to 1. And we really utilize those products that they make, specifically serotonin, dopamine, and the B vitamins. And so the way I view the world is very different. So when your D level is low, your immune system is no longer working. I call this human power saving mode. When your D level goes down below a certain point, your body isn't willing to expend the energy to do certain things. It's going to be keeping some vitamin D in reserve to absorb calcium, to keep your nerves from misfiring and you dying. So once you start to lower your D level, your body starts to shut down all non-essential functions. And this happens because of epigenetics. So if this is your whole DNA, these are all of the proteins and enzymes that you can make. As your vitamin D level goes down, you lose access to these different enzymes that are made at these higher D levels. And these are the proteins and enzymes that are made for summertime. And this is a system that Mother Nature created. So as the D level goes down, the normal bacteria, the normal flora of the mouth change and they start to overgrow. And so when it happens in the gut, when the D level goes down at the end of the summer, and now fungus overtake it, it sends a signal to the gut-brain axis to make you crave carbohydrates. And this was an evolutionary advantage to our ancestors, who in the fall would crave, and they'd put on weight. They'd find all the fruit they could. They put on weight for the long, cold coming winter. But everyone these days is literally living in a state of permanent winter, and everyone's body's powered down, and no one has those evolutionary levels again, except my patients and probably yours. But this whole system allows those bacteria to overgrow, and that's opportunistic infection. It's the same cause of acne. It's the same cause of warts. It's the same cause of any of these different infective agents. These are supposed to be controlled by our immune system. And if your immune system is running at 30 or 20% capacity, it just can't simply make enough enzymes and proteins to kill the pathogens, and you're just not going to be healthy. So that's my personal belief on where we'll see the same bacteria. I don't believe, and sure, there's some leaky barriers, but again, that's still, in my opinion, a vitamin D, potentially a sulfur deficiency, which is a different topic. But so that's what I think the link is. And you're not going to hear me say there's this mysterious link, because that's what's going on out there. And I completely disagree. There isn't a mysterious link that someone has bad periodontal disease, the bacteria goes to the brain and causes Alzheimer's. What it is, someone with advanced periodontal disease has been immunocompromised for many, many years, and they have terrible sleep apnea. Someone's basically putting a pillow over their face over and over all night long, and that hypoxia kills the brain cells. And the combination of the sugar diet, choky in sleep, and the low vitamin D, which is a whole separate issue when it comes to autophagy and apoptosis, how the cell controls its life cycle, then you have this perfect storm. Because there's really no one thing. It's this sugary diet is terrible, but you need to add in the low vitamin D causing the inflammation, and then you need to add in the chronic hypoxia of people choking in their sleep. And I've done thousands of sleep studies, and everyone says they don't have sleep apnea, but that's not true. So that's a long story about the link, but that also explains just about everything. So that explains autoimmune disease. This explains all different types of stuff. And whether you get Crohn's disease or lupus depends on your own genetic background. Keep in mind that vitamin D is an epigenetic moderator, and how it affects one person is different based on their genes.
Right. That's interesting stuff. That's something that I haven't dived into just yet. So I'm glad.
It's not out there. This is not a known theory. I'm waiting. I haven't released my book yet, but I've been filming my podcast, and I've been basically trying to bolster my information, because some of what I'm saying sounds outrageous. It's all irrefutable. When I discovered this 5 years ago, I said, this is not a disease of science. What I'm seeing here, sleep apnea, is not even a real disease. My autoimmune disease wasn't a real disease. It was just a chronic inflammatory state of my body, because our doctors don't know how we work. They don't understand. And that's the basic problem. And I'm a doctor, and I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny, because a lot of things in life are like backwards in terms of seeing how they work and then trying to figure out, well, what's the underlying mechanism. So I know that when I found out about keto, I was very skeptical, and then I did it. And then I realized, wow, this is extremely effective at improving my energy levels, improving my sleep, improving my mental clarity, and obviously decreasing my body fat. And then I took the next step into doing my master's degree to look at the diet a bit further and figuring out, well, what are the mechanisms and how is this possible? So a lot of things, like you said, are irrefutable when you see that they work. And I can just comment again on my personal experience being from Canada. You understand the winters here are dark and cold. And I'm a summer person like you. My body craves the outdoors. I love going camping. I love being at the cottage. In the summertime, I just need to be outside. I feel amazing. Again, I just really enjoy being in the sun to begin with. I sleep really well. And not only that, but I wake up in the morning feeling refreshed. Now, in the wintertime, I'm usually dragging my feet out of bed and snoozing through alarms. In the summertime, I'm up at 6:30, 10 minutes before my alarm goes off.
Right. Well, so there's a couple of things to think of there. Number one, you threw in earlier on that apnea is caused by obesity. We can talk about that because I want people to know about that one. But you're exactly right. So humans are literally solar powered animals. And of course, we utilize the energy of the sun and we use it in so many different ways. Vitamin D is just one of the things that we make. We make one other extremely profound product that no one's talking about called cholesterol sulfate. And then the other thing is that literally the photons of light charge the water in our body. We utilize that energy just like plants use it in the chlorophyll. In the chloroplast is we separate electrons and protons, and we literally are a battery for the energy of the sun in our body. So going in the sun feels good. Mother Nature doesn't make mistakes. She ties a feeling to what she wants you to do. And the question is our society is telling you to stay out of the sun. It's nonsense. And this information about sunscreen, staying out of the sun, and high cholesterol is the exact opposite of what everyone needs to think about. These are the most serious and egregious lies. They were brought in the 1980s. I remember that time. We didn't have sunscreen, and my mother came home one day and said, "We're not eating meat, and you're wearing sunscreen." And they came together with margarine, which was horrible. So
Yeah.
just because everybody believes something, it doesn't make it true. And so you can feel it. You know just from how your body feels. And just keep in mind that as we evolved and moved further away from the equator, we began to store vitamin D to be able to use it up later. And that's where white skin came from. The lighter the skin, the more vitamin D you make in less time.
Yeah. There's one more thing that I want to talk about in terms of vitamin D before we move on to talking about sleep apnea and the concept of sleep, and that's dealing with winter. So, a lot of people obviously live in cold conditions, long winters. Some people probably live in worse conditions than we do up in Canada, maybe colder, maybe longer days. But for people that want to work on this, they want to improve their vitamin D. What do you recommend? A lot of people obviously get seasonal affective disorder where, they can get a light on their desk, 10 minutes a day on their face. You can go into a tanning bed. I don't know if that's effective for this. And then also the idea of supplements versus food. So can you comment on what people can do to improve
Sure.
their vitamin D during the winter, and if things that have sun exposure or light exposure can actually help?
Right. Right. So first of all, there's a line that you can draw from Los Angeles to Atlanta, and everything north of that line is not going to get any functional vitamin D from sunlight for at least 4 months out of the year. We're just coming into that time now, which I'm hoping is going to help with this coronavirus. As more and more sunlight goes further north, the vitamin D itself will activate people's immune systems. So what people need to understand is that their vitamin D level is accidental or incidental. This isn't something that you're planning. This isn't something that you're thinking about, but it should be. This one thing, first of all, vitamin D is not a vitamin. This is a hormone. And this is a hormone that's made on our skin out of cholesterol. And this is a normal function among many other things that the sun actually makes as it strikes us. So when it comes to vitamin D, everyone in Canada needs to understand that there's no advantage to having low vitamin D. This is the main thermostat for your energy and your life. This is a battery to you. This is literally the energy of the sun in your body. So I recommend everyone supplement. And with my patients, I don't want any of them to ever be below 50, okay, which is nanograms per milliliter, and you guys are nanomoles. So if you have to switch between the two, you multiply by 2.5. So I would tell my patient my ideal is between 150 and 200. That's where I want my patients, okay? And it sounds outrageously high to doctors because they are taught that it's normal to be 50. And 50, everything below 50 is power saving mode. You are not making almost anything that you would be making in summertime. So most Canadians have a level of 20 or less. Okay, I don't know if you test for it, but so you definitely want to supplement. And a very good rule of thumb is 1,000 IU or international units per 25 pounds. So if you are a 200-pound man, you're going to take 8,000 IU. Okay. For children, if your child is 50 pounds, you're going to take 200. You're going to take 2,000 IU. Okay, everyone's taking 1,000 IU, thinking it's like 1,000 milligrams. And what people need to understand is that 1 milligram is 40,000 international units. So when I tell my sleep apnea patients I want them taking 10,000 IU, they say, "Whoa, are you trying to kill me?" They don't know it's 0.25 milligrams. And even doctors will do this as well. So if you tell your doctor that your vitamin D level is 150, or if you tell your doctor you're taking 8 or 10,000, they'll literally recoil in fear and say, "Whoa, whoa, that's toxic." And then you ask them why. They'll Google it on their phone and say, "Well, you'll get calcified organs." And then if you don't take K2, that's very possible. So vitamin D supplements must always be taken with vitamin K2 together. That's always the way they were provided by nature. And I would also supplement magnesium, and I call those the terrific trio, D3, K2, and magnesium, because the magnesium itself is required for so many of our functions, and especially activating ATP in general. So these are synergistic vitamins that go together. They've been removed from our food chain, and they're essential. Replacement of just those three simple vitamins, and in vitamin D's case, it's a hormone, that will alleviate so much pain and suffering that it's kind of shocking. So Canadians cannot request a vitamin D test at their will, but they have to have a reason. And this would bankrupt the country because everyone's deficient and there's really no value. You guys are all low, but it should change. What should happen in Canada, and I'm kind of very depressed that this hasn't happened, they haven't figured this out, is that because socialized medicine, if every person knew about their vitamin level, monitored it, it would save trillions of dollars in the colds and flus and the prescriptions that people are going in for. In the US, it's a money-making system, so people make more money. But in Canada, it's costing the government money. So it really doesn't work. And places like Kaiser still don't even do this. Kaiser is a big, more socialized version. But that's the most basic thing I can tell people. And do not worry about going too high. Worry about being too low. You will not find anyone on this planet, not anyone, with cancer and a vitamin D level of 150. You won't find those. Those two things don't coincide, okay? And it's not that vitamin D deficiency causes cancer. When your D level is that low, you can no longer regulate the cell cycles and growth. And that's where cancer will develop. And, there's cancer happening all over your body every second of the day, but your body has all these systems to repair, excise and repair your DNA, all different kinds of ways, but they all break down when we don't have enough vitamin D because Mother Nature never expected this.
Yeah, that's interesting. As someone who just recently battled cancer, I got diagnosed in the summertime, and I know there are obviously exceptions to the rule. I'm sure that biological determinism takes its course. Whether you're healthy, getting enough vitamin D, eating the best diet possible, sleeping 8 hours a day. Sometimes there's just nothing that you can really do. But I always say that it's not an excuse to not put everything forward in case it happens, or to reduce at least your risk of it happening.
Were you supplementing your vitamin D?
I was not. No.
Okay. Were you tracking it?
No.
Okay. And there's the biggest issue because this isn't known. And this is really shocking. So when I got into this, whenever I'm interested in something, I snowboard. I knew all about snowboarding. I'd play beach volleyball. I'm really into it. When I got into vitamin D, I ordered the top 3 books by the top experts. I read every article. I watched every YouTube thing. And within about a week or two, I was like, wait a second, this is really obvious. I'm just a dentist practicing in California here. And I saw these studies and I said, this is really clear. The sicker the person, the lower the D level, the bigger the tumor. And it wasn't just one study, but when they did a meta-analysis, they said, oh, no big results, no big whoop. But if you looked into the studies, the doctors who were doing the studies, half of them didn't know what they were measuring. They were measuring the dose. They were giving people 1,000 IU a day for 3 months. Never going to be enough. Your vitamin D is a reservoir. And if you take 1,000 IU, you're never going to fill it. You got to fill it fast and maintain it. So the lack of understanding of what this is in our body, this is a fat-soluble hormone that has to fill up into all the spaces. This one thing is supposed to be floating through everywhere, especially in the mitochondria. So it's the fact that you wouldn't know this. This is shocking and this is terrible. And when I said that, I didn't mean to give you a hard time because, congratulations on overcoming your illness. But the fact that you had no idea what your vitamin D level was. And, I'll find somebody who's had cancer with a D level of 50 or 60 or 150, but there's somebody who's already been supplementing because they already found out they had cancer. And then half of the oncologists think it's important and half don't even mention it. But this one thing, and it makes such perfect sense, this is something we would be getting from living outdoors. And the life that we're living that you think is normal, getting into your car, going into your office, this isn't the life that these bodies evolved to live. We're hunter-gatherers that evolved to be connected to nature. And one of the ways that we were connected, aside from being barefoot, eating natural whole foods, is being out in the sun. So it's this combination of things that separates us from the conditions that created us, that causes these diseases. And cancer is one of the most serious and most profound. And it's the most tragic because if everyone maintained a level of 50, sure, some people are going to get cancer. All of life follows the bell curve. But the majority, the shocking majority of cancers, when we take those people's vitamin D level, they're well below 20. Well, and that's, this is terrifying. I don't have a single patient, by the way, who had cancer who doesn't have sleep apnea, just so you know. I don't have a single patient who doesn't have autoimmune disease and sleep apnea because they're both caused by low vitamin D. Simple as that.
Yeah, and the same way that, your main focus is looking at vitamin D and is linked to a plethora of diseases and chronic illness. What I looked at was sugar and the role that sugar and insulin play in not just obesity, but heart disease, cancer. I mean, really, I'm you, but with the concept of sugar and processed foods, because, the way I look at it is heart disease is the number one killer of men, right? Like men, it's the number one killer in North America. And, well, how do you get heart disease? Well,
that's a question though, because do we really know the root cause of heart disease? Do we really know it?
I mean, heart disease can be caused by being obese and having chronically elevated levels of glucose and insulin.
Okay, right. So I want you to think about a couple of different things. So why are people obese? And what is that sugar doing? It's causing a terrible amount of inflammation. When the vitamin D level is low, you do not make your anti-inflammatory enzymes. You do not make your superoxide dismutase. You do not make your glutathione. And you can Google all that. When the D level is too low, you will not transcribe those proteins to make those enzymes. So even though everyone wants to, is wholeheartedly stuck on the sugar thing, which I agree, sugar itself, as it builds up in your skin, prevents you from making vitamin D. And that's one of the real reasons why people's levels are dropping in addition to staying out of the sun. But when those people who eat a very high carbohydrate diet go in the sun, the sunlight itself will not make as much vitamin D due to something called deuterated cholesterol. So the paradigm that I discovered is kind of shocking because you've got people like Bob Harper, who was in The Biggest Loser, and he's alive. He had a heart attack. Why does that guy have a heart attack? He's extremely fit. He's following a Mediterranean diet. He's exercising. He's following every single tenet that you're subscribing to. But why would he have a heart attack? Why does someone like Luke Perry die of a heart attack? Why do fit people have these issues? And it's the same thing when people come to my office. If they're obese, they say, well, I have sleep apnea because I'm fat. And if they're thin, the doctors are saying, well, you have it because it's genetic. And that's so damaging and not true. These are environmental diseases. And what you're looking at when you see those obese people, those are the people who've been stuck in this paradigm, choking in their sleep, stuck in permanent winter, month after month, year after year. And that obesity and that illness and the inflammation and the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is all a function of decreased mitochondrial output and someone being stuck in permanent winter. This is a very simple paradigm. And the more you look into it, the more it should blow your mind because that's what everyone's suffering from. People who can't lose weight. I starve myself. I'm a smart guy. I had a personal trainer. I exercised. I did everything, every program. And I was never able to get fit until my vitamin D level came up from well below 20 or in your 50 up into the 150 range. It changed everything because when I would go to the gym and work out, I wouldn't build muscle. I wouldn't break down fat. I would break down muscle because I didn't have the right gut bacteria. I was stuck in winter mode, and that's B vitamins. So I'd say maintaining that higher level of vitamin D keeps you having much more energy and prevents all these things. But most importantly, it gets you into regular sleep because all of life is a cycle of wear and tear and then repair at night and regeneration. If you're not sleeping right, you're breaking down. And those are the people you see, those obese people. I call them roadkill. It's so obvious they have sleep apnea. And this is a syndrome. And it's not their fault. They're eating the standard American diet, which is sad. And they're having glucerna and they're eating snacks of sugar. Diabetes is the wrong diet. This is a very, very big mistake. But the heart disease itself it's more than one thing. It's more than vitamin D deficiency. It's magnesium deficiency, vitamin D deficiency, too much sugar. But there's also another profound deficiency that I believe is at the core of cardiovascular disease that has not been discussed yet, but you're going to hear about it. You're going to hear about it from me, and that is a cholesterol sulfate deficiency. And it's something that you shouldn't have heard of before, but when you see it, all you're going to say, you're going to scratch your head and say, yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense because it's related to cholesterol. It's related to HDL and LDL. Sulfur was a major component of our food chain until we processed foods. And you can look into those blue zones all you want, and you're going to find high mineral content, steep hills that people walk, lots of sunlight, good community. That's why the blue zones are healthy. They have all these things that we evolved to have in abundance right at hand, whereas people living a modern life, we're totally separated from that environment.
No, that makes sense. And just two more quick questions before we move on to sleep apnea. You mentioned 10,000 international units of vitamin D3. You also mentioned vitamin K2 and magnesium. Is there a range with those that we should be supplementing? And then the second part to that is, how do we get more sunlight in the wintertime?
So you can simply put, in Canada, it's of no value. You can go outside and get some sun because sunlight will also indicate how much melatonin you're going to make. The melatonin is inversely proportional to the amount of sun that you get exposed to. So I think it's good to get as much sunlight as you can on a regular basis. But if you live in Canada, you can't. It's just not possible. You must supplement. You will not find vitamin D in enough foods. You'll find it in fatty seafood like smoked salmon. You'll find it a little bit in egg yolks, but you cannot find a substantial or meaningful amount in food. And it's placed artificially into milk and juice in only 100 international units. And it's vitamin D2, which is not the right type of vitamin D. That's the plant version. So not supplementing is extremely ridiculous. And the idea that doctors haven't figured this out is very disappointing. But your listeners are obviously open to sort of more of a revolution of healthcare rather than going to your doctor, waiting for your body to break down, and then waiting for a prescription to hide the symptoms of disease. You can't fix or repair something unless you know how it works and why it broke down in the first place. And our doctors still really don't know. And that's what I discovered. The paradigm I discovered was so shocking, and it is the sleep apnea paradigm. That's why I called my book The Modern Epidemic. This one thing, a lack of sunlight, puts into action a chain of events, choking in your sleep all night long, that allows every single person just to become the worst version of themselves. Add in these other deficiencies and then add in too much sugar, which is too much deuterium and too much glyphosate. We have glyphosate here. Hopefully you guys are keeping it out of the country, but we have it here. So
that's sleep, I would say, next to obviously working out and eating well, is probably the most important thing. And if you don't sleep well, there's a really good chance you're not going to eat well or exercise during the day. So sleep is probably the most important thing that you need to focus your priority on, because the rest of it will follow with enough motivation or dedication, whatever you want to call it. But definitely sleep is critical. So, when
you wake up and you haven't slept right, you feel hungry, you want to eat something sugary. It's all falls from that. So, it's hard to be ketogenic when you're craving carbohydrate.
100%. And so, one thing I do, just to touch on it, is I grind my teeth an insane amount. If you look at the shape of my bottom teeth and my top teeth, they basically are like a puzzle piece that comes together. And I got a night guard from my dentist probably way too late, because I've grinded my teeth down a lot over the past 10 years, I would say. And I don't know what it is. I've tried exercising, eating well, meditating, and I feel like some days I do have some headaches that might be related to TMJ. And maybe I do have some sort of sleep apnea.
So Joel, I'll explain the syndromes. Okay, so just so you know, this is one of the first times this particular theory is being spoken. I've only done a few podcasts where I'm revealing this, but basically Bruxism and wearing a grinding guard is a traditional classic allopathic treatment. You grind your teeth so you protect them. Good idea. Most treatments that we have to do is going to have an allopathic component. So you're going to want to protect your teeth, but what's the root cause of grinding? Now, if you go to my Instagram feed, it's at Dr. Joel Gould's Soul Sleep, you will see a picture of a baby. Its tongue is making a weird waving motion. And what that is that's the part of the brain, the autonomic nervous system that controls the bulbar muscles, is short-circuiting. And when you don't have teeth, the tongue will do that. You probably have scallop tongue as well, where the tongue is pushing against the lower teeth and will take on indentations of that. And this is just a dysfunction of the coordinated movement of breathing and sleep. Your bruxism isn't a sign that you have apnea, but it's a sign that you could. This is what comes along in the whole syndrome because the brain's sending a signal that's supposed to be coordinated, but it's getting garbled because the neurons themselves don't have enough energy to transmit that finely. And then over time, when you stop breathing, and that's what sleep apnea is, the brain cells start to die. So the actual cerebellum, the Purkinje fibers of the cerebellum start to die, and the coordination of sleep and breathing itself starts to fail. And that's why we can do exercises that will decrease sleep apnea because retraining the muscles can work. So your bruxism is exclusively a vitamin D deficiency, primary, with a secondary B vitamin deficiency, and that's it. So when I found this out, and this is not posted anywhere, I'm recording things to try and publish this, but you have to understand that I ground my teeth my whole life. And at the age of 48, when I discovered this, I was grinding my teeth so badly, I was wearing my grinding guard during the day when I was working on patients and drilling their teeth because I couldn't stop. I was clenching. Within 2 weeks of taking an evolutionary amount of vitamin D, I started taking 20,000 IU of vitamin D every day. Sounds like a massive amount, 0.5 milligrams. It's the amount you could make out in the sun in 20 minutes if there was sunlight and it was the right time of day. And within 2 weeks, I stopped grinding my teeth during the day. It took me another 2 years to find out why I was grinding at night, okay? And that's a B vitamin deficiency. So if you don't know your D level and you're not taking 8 to 10,000 IU of vitamin D, that's the root cause of your bruxism, number one. If you get a D level in the 60 to 80 range and you're still clenching or grinding, you do not have enough B vitamins. And what we find with our patients who are children that grind their teeth, you can hear them grinding, if we dose the right B vitamin, they'll stop grinding their teeth because that's all this is. This is the B vitamins run the electron transport chain. And so the neurons in the brain do not have enough B vitamins to accurately produce enough energy to control the airway. And the result is a short circuit that you see as bruxism. That is how it plays out. So we're on air doing this, but I don't know if you know your D level. I don't know how much you supplement, but if you do these things, this is going to work because science works for everyone. This is the root cause. And this is not published on. This is not known. I've been screaming this for 5 years, but nobody wants to listen to me. What they're telling people is that the kids grind their teeth. They're trying to grow their teeth out, which is ridiculous. And when people have apnea, that the bruxism is the way to open your mouth. Well, when I want to breathe, I open my mouth. I don't grind my teeth. This is just a short circuit. Why do some people snore? Some people don't snore. That neural control and the elasticity of the palate makes a difference whether you snore or not. So the bruxism itself is a sign that you are vitamin D deficient. I'm going to assume that you do have scallop tongue. I'm going to assume that your level is probably well under 50.
Yeah, that's interesting. I could probably reflect back and follow up with you because obviously during the course of my treatment from August till, even now I get follow-up blood work done every month. I don't know if they're checking for vitamin D. I have to look at my report. Yeah, probably not. I don't remember seeing it. I know they look at my electrolytes. I've looked at my magnesium, potassium, calcium before. I've never seen vitamin D. I'd have to double check.
It's not. It's not. So I want to just explain to you. So both my parents died of pancreatic cancer. And when I went to their doctor, I don't want to say who it was. I went to their doctor with printed out peer-reviewed studies, and I'm asking these questions about vitamin D. He doesn't test his patients, doesn't supplement it. This is the major controlling hormone for over 3,000 genes, all associated with cellular proliferation. This is shocking. Literally the information I'm telling you is so obvious, discovered 90 years ago, but over the last 10, 20 years, there's so many scientific studies supporting this. You're not hearing about this. Here in the US, it's because the big business is going to subvert this because they don't want to lose money. But in Canada, this is very disappointing. Now, I discovered this, and when I went around the country, here in the US and around the world, the people that I contacted, I said, well, how is this happening? And they were like, money, vitamin D is free. What's funny is in France, you cannot buy vitamin D without a prescription, but you can walk outside for free and get sunlight. So this is a very unique concept. This has been completely missed by medicine, and this is at the root cause of cancer. It's not the only cause. It's at the root cause. And that's why I say you will not find somebody with a D level of 50 or 150 in cancer. Those two conditions don't coexist because it's the lack of the cell's ability to undergo apoptosis that causes the cancer. That relates to the cancer. I don't want to say causes anything.
Yeah. No, I will try supplementing with D3, and I'll do a follow-up with you because I want to see how it affects my sleep, the grinding of my teeth, how I feel in the morning, and obviously my mood overall. Now, it's obviously not the most ideal time because spring is around the corner, the days are getting longer, and I'm going to start to feel generally well anyways, but it still will be interesting to see what happens.
Well, my advice is that if someone said, everyone's worried about getting cancer. Now, if you saw how many studies would you need to see that people who had a level of 150 nanomoles and over didn't get cancer? How many studies would you need to see to want to be at that level? To me, it'd be one or two, as long as it was a properly done study. Because if people who have that level are less likely to get cancer, why wouldn't I want that? Wait, why is my level low? Well, it's low because I live in northern climate and I wear clothing and I'm not out there suntanning when the sun is available to make vitamin D, which is a different issue as well. People will say, oh, my vitamin D level is fine. I spend a ton of time outside. My doctor is amazing. All my blood work came back normal. Or, I walk my dog twice a day, but they're walking their dog at 9 a.m. and at 3:30 p.m. and they're not getting vitamin D. So this is a very complex issue. And you should, when this interview is over, you're probably going to look up some stuff because it's not cool. I suffered for 48 years. I suffered in pain and shame with this gross disease for 48 years, only to find 3 peer-reviewed studies where they took 20 people, 19 people, 32 people and gave them vitamin D and their Crohn's disease disappeared. I went down to my gastroenterologist and said, what's up, dude? And he said, oh, hey, I have an infusion of Remicade here for you for $7,000. And I said, no, look at this. And he wouldn't even look. So we're in this position where, and you're going to have a really hard time believing this because this is the root cause of almost everyone's illness. And again, there's always outliers and you can't say always never, but this is the root cause. And you go start to look at some studies on PubMed. And if you see a study that says, oh, vitamin D is not so important, find out if they ever did a blood level, number one. Many studies never took a blood level. This is a hormone. They just gave a dose. There's one where they said that giving vitamin D to children is of no value. They gave them 1,000 IU for 4 weeks. Couldn't fill their tank. So there's a massive amount of disinformation out there related to vitamin D. And this is, again, the root cause of sleep apnea as well. Now, you may not have apnea. If you raise your vitamin D level, you may not. I think you probably already do because what happened to you. I think your level's been too low for too long. And it's the hypoxia of sleep apnea that speeds cancer's growth. So just keep that in mind. And this is happening around the world. My book is called The Modern Epidemic. It's not just in Canada and the US. This is happening in Japan. This is happening in India. There's a massive amount of illness with vitamin D deficiency in India.
Yeah, and you need to, if you have a podcast or if you're looking to speak to someone who's more in-depth in this field, talk to Dr. Paul Saladino. He preaches the carnivore diet, but he's also big on sunlight. I believe he moved to San Diego, if I'm not mistaken, and he's opening up a practice there. But I had a really interesting conversation with him, one of my longest podcasts, and he is, like yourself, a man of science, and he has the literature to back up what he's saying. And you guys are, right along the same cusp. He focuses more on diet, you focus more on vitamin D specifically, but
we're involved in the same group called Sapiens. Mm-hmm. It's sort of, it's there's a podcast called Peak Human by Brian Saunders and a podcast called Sapiens. And that's this group of guys. They're good friends with Paul. I haven't met Paul at this point in time, but I know we're all filming different video segments to share this message. My information, Brian did a movie called called Food Lies about the deception that you're really into. And so we're sort of thinking about doing the same type of thing about the sun, because this is really bad. And even if you don't want to go in the sun, then you need to supplement vitamin D. It's okay. If you feel like you had an uncle who had melanoma and you don't want to go in the sun, I think it's a mistake. Okay. But, this is the sun exposure. This is going to be one of the most controversial things. Here I am, a dentist, telling you sleep apnea is not caused by obesity. I run my own sleep studies and I'm telling you to go in the sun. Literally, I'm the worst person to ever enter into medicine here, because I'm saying exactly the opposite. And I don't even have the qualifications of being a real doctor. I'm just a dentist, which I'm happy with. Very happy.
Yeah, but you're educated, and the whole point is it doesn't matter what your credentials are as long as you're willing to do the research and back it up.
30 years as a clinician gives me some insight, but everything I discuss has peer-reviewed studies that supports this. I won't make any silly claims. It's not worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't like to open up discussions with people who don't have science to back up their claims. Whether we agree or disagree or not, you have to come to the table with some sort of argument. My point of the podcast is obviously not to sit here and argue about whether our hosts are right or wrong. It's about getting information out of them and seeing what sources they have to back it up. And I know sometimes I probably ramble a bit too much about my insight or my experience or knowledge. But at the end of the day, this is about seeing your knowledge and where your research comes from, and shedding that light into our listeners, and them letting, they should be taking the liberty to say, okay, I want to look into this more, and then make a decision after that. Not just listen to it and say, well, this guy who has a doctor in front of his name said it, so I'm going to believe it. So, I really want to focus a bit more on the sleep side of things. And I know this is also, growing in popularity with things like blackout blinds or mouth tape, or, a lot of companies now are wearing those, they're developing those thick eye masks that are supposed to remove 100% of light so that you can get good sleep. So I want to know one thing, what is the role of caffeine during the day and too close before bed? I've noticed for me, unless I'm exercising, I shouldn't be having caffeine up to 6 to 10 hours before I go to bed. Otherwise, I get poor sleep and I can't fall asleep right away. So usually I try to be in bed by 10. If I'm going to the gym, I'll have a cup of coffee around 3. That usually helps me out a lot with my workouts. And because of the sweat, I find that, even though there's a half-life, it tends to get out of my body a little bit faster. If not, my last coffee will probably be at about noon. So then it's about 10 hours. And by the time I go to sleep at 10 p.m., I don't really struggle with that. So I want to know what the role of caffeine is before bed, because when people have sleep apnea or they sleep poorly, they tend to fall into a vicious cycle of being over caffeinated, and then they get worse sleep. And, that cycle just continues and continues. So I want to know about caffeine and sleep, and also the role of things like blackout blinds, mouth tape so that you can breathe through your nose. Does wearing an eye mask really do anything?
Sure. Okay. So, before we go into the sleep, I just want to, all this stuff that I'm going to be talking about is related to the brainstem and its control of sleep. All the other stuff is ancillary. So I want you to think about hunter-gatherers sleeping on the ground with animals and rustling trees and everything. We didn't have these sleep number beds. We didn't have blackout blinds, but we need them because we have this artificial light. So all of these different factors, too much caffeine, the actual caffeine molecule blocks a chemical that's supposed to be making you tired. Okay, so when you have caffeine, you're blocking that ability to get tired. I personally don't drink caffeine past 2 or 3, and I don't recommend it for any of my patients. So my program is called Sleep Restoration, because sleep apnea is a gross, unappealing title that people view as an accusation of poor health. And not only that, once you don't sleep right, where do you go? There's no doctor that you can go to that gives you the tools of what to do to sleep. So that's what I like to view myself as. After 30 years doing dentistry, I want to exclusively work on sleep restoration, because when you go to a medical sleep doctor, they're going to put a CPAP on your face and push you out the door. You're done. I believe this syndrome is preventable and reversible. So we want to go to the root cause of what it is. But having said that, definitely not having caffeine past two or 3, number 1. Number 2, you don't need blackout lights unless you're in the city, because all the light is blue light, and blue light tells your brain and the suprachiasmatic nucleus, that's your main time clock, that it's daytime. Number 1. Number 2 is blue light in your eyes destroys melatonin. You do not want your melatonin destroyed. Melatonin is your anti-cancer drug. That's why blue light has been classified as a class 2A carcinogen, because blue light in your eyes all night long will prevent you from making melatonin. So definitely you want to have everything, all of those dots are great to put over any little lights in your room. And I personally have multiple sets of blue blockers that I put on the minute I get home. I have one at the door, one by my bed. I get home, before I put the lights on, I put on my blue blockers. Now, the next place I move to or live in or build is going to have time-controlled lighting. But our bodies are adapted to the circadian rhythms of the world that we live in and the day and night cycle. And when we live indoors and have this artificial light, we totally screw that up. So I want to try and simulate the circadian rhythms of our ancestors. So I'll wear blue blockers, and I will not take them off until I'm in bed with everything off, and then I'll take them off, keep my eyes closed. If I have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, I don't get up without putting those on. Whatever I can do to eliminate that blue light from sneaking in your body as well. When you see people at the beach, and this is the saddest part, you see people at the beach with hats, glasses, covering their neck and their bodies. They don't want one bit of sunlight to hit them. That's the outfit you should wear at the gym when you're there at 8 p.m. When you're at the gym in your shorts under that blue light, you're telling your body it's noon. It's very bad. So blocking blue light, I prefer not to eat past 6 if it's possible, the weekend, whatever. So if you eat too late, you don't sleep as well. And aside from that, I'm not that interested in these other things. This has been written up. You got to have this, got to have that. There's so, Ariana Huffington did a great book on sleep. There's no tools in there. what I discovered are what are the metrics and the tools. What do you do when you wake up at 3:30 in the morning and you can't get back to sleep? That's what I discovered. And that's what's happening to people. They're running out of sleep and they can't get back to it. They're blaming themselves because they think they can't shut down the racing mind. And this is a biochemical issue. This is not a psychological issue, but your thoughts and your brain chemistry, these are inseparable. What are you going to do? You cannot separate the two. I don't know if that was helpful, but I'm giving different, varied information. I am not a sleep expert in the same way that people are talking about. Some of us, you can put a cold thing across your head. These things can help. But why is the entire sleep system breaking down? And that's really what I discovered.
Right. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying. You're helping people improve their sleep and not necessarily diving into, what would you call it, the medical aspect of it, or, because you understand why it's happening in the first place. So you can just address that issue from the get-go, right? So I understand where you're coming from. And, it also depends on person to person. For me, I have to eat before I go to bed or else I wake up hungry and I can't sleep. So other people, I think it's also important to experiment. Like, I find that intermittent fasting through the day and then eating at night works the best for me. That's how I get energy. That's how I sleep well. That's how I stay lean. Some people, it's the opposite. They like to eat in the morning and then fast throughout the night. So again, experimenting for anyone that's listening is going to be super important. I guess there is no rule book on how you can improve your sleep, but try blue blockers. That might help your sleep. Maybe put on,
sure.
Yeah.
You're going to increase your melatonin. So when it comes to getting hungry in the night, you have to understand that if you're completely metabolically flexible, you should be able to sleep through the night. You can take, I have brain octane soft gels that I will take. If I'm doing a 5-day fast and I'm worried that I'm going to be hungry, I will take 2 soft gels before going to bed. And so those are basically MCT oil that I'm going to be able to digest. It's going to keep everything running. I'm not going to be hungry or wake up. So that's one of the strategies that I tell people to do if they don't want to eat late. But whatever, everyone's different. Whatever works for you is great. But what I see, and it's sort of age dependent on how people sleep, is that the millennials have a very hard time gearing down for sleep. They sleep very light, they wake up a lot and don't feel well rested. Once you progress to a certain point, you have apnea, you sleep, but you kind of feel crummy.
Yep. And it's funny, there's a lot of things that are being overstated now. And I hear way too many people telling me that they are insomniacs or that they just can't sleep. And,
True. It's true, they can't.
It is true. And at the end of the day, you have to look at, well, what is your behavior? What are your eating habits? And are you supplementing with the right things? So complaining about, having a certain problem is one thing, but trying to do research to address that is a whole nother ball game.
Well, I want you to understand something here. The information that I discovered is not known. I'm going to be one of the first people putting this out there in a meaningful way for the general public to see. You cannot find what I discovered except in certain different research papers. So even though I agree with you that it's your overall health care and having a whole foods diet and taking care of yourself that matters, what I want everyone to understand is that there is a specific brain chemistry issue. And I'm going to tell this to you for anyone who's more sciencey thinking, oh, this guy's talking a big game. This is the simple equation. The brain cells of the autonomic nervous system that control sleep, without enough vitamin D, they cannot transcribe or make the enzyme choline acetyltransferase. Choline acetyltransferase makes acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the primary neurotransmitter of the parasympathetic nervous system. And what that means in English for everyone is that you have 2 different settings in your brain as a more primitive animal. You have your fight or flight, which is your gas pedal, and you have your rest and digest, which is your brakes. And all day long, animals are going through their environment saying, oh, did a twig snap? Is that a predator? And we're calm, everything's good, I'm comfortable here. And we're always gassing and braking and gassing and braking. When your acetylcholine goes down, the parasympathetic nervous system cannot get activated. You've cut the brake cables and all you are is gassing all day long. And that's central sensitization syndrome, which you probably suffer from. And that's why people can't gear down for sleep. They do not have enough acetylcholine to make the appropriate chemicals. This is the major issue of people not being able to gear down. Now, as the syndrome progresses, you can no longer make a lot of the other neurotransmitters, and sleep really fails and it becomes very fragmented. But the initial stage, highly reversible. And so as that acetylcholine is being made, there's one secondary component to this that's the linchpin, and that's a B vitamin, B5. Okay, so just this one enzyme choline acetyltransferase needs vitamin B5 pantothenic acid to be able to make acetylcholine. They did studies. I learned this from an incredible scientist, neurologist by the name of Stasha Gomanak. You can Google her, look her up. She's fascinating. She saved my life. And that's what she discovered. But as I delved into her science, she said, hey, Joel, when the D level goes down, the B vitamins are no longer made, and B5 is made into acetylcholine. But all the other B vitamins, those are also the substrates and cofactors and parts of B vitamins. And so when these B vitamins go down, that's your winter setting. That's you not having enough energy to make the right neurotransmitters. And if your body can't stay in good, deep sleep, there's nothing you can do except replace those chemical elements. And I see this profoundly on a nightly basis when my patients dose their B vitamins. We'll see someone go from terrible apnea to almost none because of this. This is something that's completely different. This has not been published. This has not been put out there because all of my colleagues, as much as I love them, are all talking about the size and shape of the jaw. But you have to ask yourself this. If you can breathe while you're awake, then you can breathe while you're asleep. There's nothing wrong with the structure of your jaw. Mm-hmm. This is an issue with the paralysis and the airway during sleep. This is not a structural issue. They're doing surgery on people. They're cutting people's tongues out, which is terrifying.
Yeah, that is pretty terrifying.
This is happening all around the country. They're mutilating people, and this is a hormone deficiency. It's sad.
Yeah,
that's why I really want. That's why I really want to get on as many podcasts as possible because children are suffering from this. Children are being put into CPAPs at age 8 and 9. It's destroying their lives. This is terrible. Yeah. And if you have hold on, I do want to say two things. Anyone to listen to this, if you have a child that grinds their teeth, give them vitamin D right away and vitamin K2. This is bad. Their sleep cycle is being interrupted. If you have a child that wets the bed, snores, or sucks their finger or thumb, do not pull their finger or thumb out of their mouth. They are creating an oral device to keep their airway open. Thumb sucking is a vitamin D deficiency. Irrefutable, okay? Now, I don't have a study to show that yet, but I will, because that's something that's very easy to show, because you'll see the kids who suck their thumbs, they're all vitamin D deficient, and you can tell when you pull a thumb out, you can hear them choke. Terrifying. And that's what we make. Dentists make oral devices that keep the airway further forward and open. So this child who is sucking their thumb or finger, they're prying their jaw open to sleep.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm seeing my two friends later tonight, and I will have this conversation with them. I'll make sure that they listen to this podcast because they're early on in their dentistry careers, and I'm sure this is valuable information to have. I think this is a really good place to wrap up the podcast. And if you want to to summarize everything, try and get some sun. If you can't, if you're stuck in Toronto like me and you don't have a killer tan like yourself, try to visit down south often. And if you can't do that, then supplement with vitamin D3, vitamin K2, and magnesium if you want to improve your sleep. B vitamins are also very important. So if there's anything else you want to add, or if you also want to link your website or your social media, people can keep an eye out for your content, and also if you announce your book later on.
Right. Yeah. So I have a YouTube channel now called Modern Hunter Gatherers. And that's where I have all my old podcasts from 5 years ago that I remastered. Some of the interviews I did with some of the top people in the world, they're really worth a listen to. They say some incredible things on there. You can find me at Modern American Dentistry. My location is Manhattan Beach, but I have a website. And my new sleep website is called Modern Sleep Solutions. Basically I see patients here, but I'm hoping to launch this. I have 3 different books, different tiers of levels of information. And I want to let people know that doctors miss this. They didn't learn about this in medical school, and you don't know what you don't know. Imagine they missed an entire system of messaging that affects our DNA. So when you go to your doctor, and if you say you're taking 5,000 or 8,000 IU vitamin D, they will freak out. Don't let them worry you. They haven't done the research, but you can. Most of my material goes into great depth of why these numbers are okay. And, unfortunately in Canada, those numbers look different. We're talking about levels of 60 to 80 or near 150 to 200. But don't let these levels scare you. Your doctor thinks 50 is normal. 50 is 20. It's deficient by all standards, and it's absolutely opening the door to cancer. Do not take vitamin D without vitamin K2. It was never meant to be had without K2, and best done with magnesium. It may be hard for people to find their vitamin K2 in Canada. My website is Modern Hunter Gatherers, not launched yet, but you should be able to buy mine. And I had an organic, non-GMO set of vitamins just for sleep and sleep apnea done up with my cartoon characters which I think I sent you, because I really want these characters to get known, because this is such a profound deficiency that I suffered as a child for no reason. And I want these cartoon characters to really keep this message forward.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for taking the time. I hope that I could visit you at your location down south.
Sure.
I'm trying to think about if we have any trade shows or expos coming up later in California, but you'll expect a call from me. So,
Sure.
yeah.
You're always welcome. I have a studio right here in my office, and I'm filming all types of content. I'm filming with Sapiens, all kinds of really cool stuff. The stuff that you're doing. And again, what I was so surprised, I found a way to tie it together, and I'm really excited about that. So come down here. You're welcome to any time. We'll interview you, and hopefully we'll see the difference in your bruxism and your sleep.
Sounds good. I will actually keep you posted, and hopefully I'll give all of our listeners an update on our next podcast at the very beginning of it, because it's important to put these things into application and also see how they work out. So I will start supplementing, and I will give you an update. So thanks again for being part of the show, and I'm sure we'll connect soon.
Very good. My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.